Call this work session of the James City County Board of Supervisors to order. Mr. Porter?
Mr. McGlinnan?
Here.
Ms. Tyson?
Here.
Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. Hippel?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
All present.
Okay, and I call to order this continued meeting of the Board of Directors from July 10th, 2018. Mr. Powell, please call the roll.
Mr. McGlinnan. Here. Mr. Eisenhower. Here. Mr. Hippel. Here. Ms. Larson.
Here.
Ms. Sadler.
Here.
All right. We're going to begin with the board discussion.
Yes, I think I'm starting.
Where are you going?
Before I begin, I do want to introduce the folks that I have here with me. Michael Vergakis is our Chief Water Engineer. Stephanie Luton is the Assistant General Manager, and Danny Poe is our Chief Wastewater Engineer. I wasn't sure that all of you knew all of them, so I really just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce them. This comprises the senior leadership team of the Service Authority. Each one of these individuals has, give or take, about 20 years of service to either the county or to the Service Authority, and they do a great job. And I just wanted to take a minute to introduce them and recognize them. So.
Thank you, especially for the viewing public as well, so that they know. Thank you.
All right. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. As you know, the recently adopted strategic plan includes an initiative to develop a water conservation plan. The Service Authority has a water conservation and management plan already that is incorporated by reference into our recently approved groundwater withdrawal permit that we received from DEQ. But that permit does require us to update the plan by the end of 2020. As discussed during the budget process, the primary purpose of this work session is to discuss the issue of water conservation. But before we proceed with that discussion, I think it'd be helpful to review the status of our current water system. Our water system, just like any other public water system, is regulated by two state agencies. The Department of Environmental Quality, their purview is the environment, and therefore they regulate the withdrawal. And then the Health Department, whose purview is public health, they regulate the distribution. Or another way of looking at it is their regulations begin to apply as soon as the water comes to our water treatment facility. JCSA currently operates under a groundwater withdrawal permit that allows an average annual 6 million gallons per day withdrawal. The permit increases up to 8.4 million gallons a day based on demand over the life of the permit, which expires in 2027. And our current average annual demand is 5.4 million gallons a day. These numbers have been discussed pretty extensively over the past couple of years as we've negotiated our groundwater withdrawal permit, and hopefully these numbers look familiar to you. We believe that the current permit will meet our demand over the life of the permit. And while average annual day withdrawal is the metric that has garnered the most attention over the last few years, it's not the only metric that we must be concerned with. As I mentioned previously, we also have a Health Department permit. The Health Department permits our maximum day demand, and our current permit with them is for 9.973 million gallons a day, which means that in no day should the Service Authority exceed 9.973 million gallons. And that number is arrived at based on source, our storage capacity, and our pumping ability. So based on our population and demand growth estimates, this chart depicts our projections for the DEQ average day withdrawal in the first column, the DEQ maximum month withdrawal in the second column, and then the Health Department maximum day in the third column. If our groundwater withdrawal permit was not under threat of being reduced, we would not expect to exceed our DEQ average day annual withdrawal permit of 8.4 million gallons a day until 2041. And we would not expect to exceed our DEQ maximum month withdrawal limit until 2047. However, based on current projections, we do expect to exceed our Health Department maximum day permit in 2025, which is obviously earlier than the DEQ permits and likely to be before we would have another source of water online. This graph basically depicts the same information. It's just presented a little bit differently. This red circle here represents the trigger point for the DEQ maximum month withdrawal in 2047. This red circle represents the trigger point for the DEQ permit for average day withdrawal, 2041. And then this represents the trigger point for the health department permit in 2025. So the idea here is, what can we do? This cursor goes in and out, apologize. What can we do to move this number out some? That's the idea. And the answer to that is we can either add another source or we can manage demand. As you know, we're working diligently to find an alternative sustainable water supply, and I'll update the board on those efforts later in the presentation. But I'm really going to focus on the demand management part of the equation in this presentation. To help explore demand management options, I want to share a little bit more data about the nature of our system. This is a daily demand curve, and which shows very clearly that JCA's system is characterized by peak periods of high demand. We chose a representative day in the winter, February 7th, and a representative day in the summer, July 18th, and plotted the results. And I would note these dates are from 2017. So the orange dotted line here represents the demand, total demand for February 7th. The orange solid line represents the hourly demand prorated over a daily basis. You can see the peak demand for February 7th was 6.82 million gallons, and the demand for the day was 3.81 million gallons. Similarly, the dotted blue line represents the daily demand for July 18th, 7.49 million gallons, which is almost exactly double the demand for February 7th. The blue solid line represents the hourly demand on a prorated daily basis. The maximum hour for July 18th is 16.96 million gallons. That occurred at 6 o'clock in the morning. Note the difference between the maximum day or the maximum hour on February 7th, 6.82, and the maximum hour on July 18th of 16.96. It's a difference of 10.1 million gallons a day, equalized. So I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know when I say irrigation is the reason for our peak demands. In preparation for this work session, we contracted with a consultant to evaluate a couple of different options that we would have to evaluate options to manage irrigation demand. The first thing he did was to try to quantify what the total irrigation demand was. This chart shows our total yearly demand for the calendar year 2017 was 2.07 billion gallons.
That's also not just irrigation. That's everything.
That's correct. Okay. That's total demand. Our submeters, our directly reported use from submeters was 0.32 billion gallons. These two numbers are precise numbers. Those are exact numbers. But then the consultant also wanted to analyze the peak use of customers without submeters and estimated that an additional 0.25 billion gallons were used for irrigation through a single meter. That is, those gallons did not go through a submeter. Now, this number was a little higher than I expected, but it is determined by identifying accounts that increased their usage by more than 20% during the summer months, and assuming that usage over the 20% increase was for irrigation. Using this methodology, total irrigation demand was 0.57 billion gallons, or 27% of total system demand. So as I mentioned, we asked the consultant to evaluate a couple of different ideas and evaluate the impact they would have on system demands and revenues. The first idea was to place a moratorium on the submeter program, which would allow existing customers to continue using submeters but not new customers. As a reminder, submeters measure water that does not enter the sewer system, and under the submeter program, customers who irrigate are incentivized to obtain a submeter because it reduces their sewer bill since they are not billed a sewer usage charge. JCSA serves approximately 6,230 customers with sub-meters. It's been my belief that the sub-meter program is counter to our goal of conservation, and that's why I asked the consultant to evaluate a moratorium on the program. However, I've concluded that while sub-meters may make it easier for the customer to irrigate, that doing away with them without any other policy changes would result in a significant inequity, and therefore I'm not recommending any changes to the sub-meter program. The consultant also evaluated a change in the current irrigation schedule. Currently, we operate on an even-odd schedule with no irrigation on Monday, and customers can irrigate 3 times a week. The consultant evaluated a schedule that allows customers to irrigate twice per week. Under this scenario, we would still allow irrigation 6 days a week, but only 1/3 of customers would be allowed to irrigate in any one day, instead of 1/2 of our customers being allowed to irrigate in any one day. Consultant expected that this would reduce overall demand, and also expects that we would see a revenue reduction of 5 to 10%. But more importantly, however, is that by reducing the number of customers that can irrigate in any one day, we believe that will decrease the maximum day demand, which is actually our biggest issue in the short term. Another idea that was generated from the study was the billing cycle, specifically the idea of transitioning to monthly billing. As a result of our current cycle of quarterly billing, a significant amount of time exists between the time that the customer receives their bill and the use of their water. This routinely results in customers receiving a bill for irrigation actions that were taken 3 months in the past, and there's little to no opportunity for the customer to modify their behavior as a result of the bill. Consultant believes, based on experience in other localities, that transitioning to monthly billing is a significant action that will encourage conservation. During the budget process, I had mentioned that after the radio read meter project was completed, that I thought we should transition to bi-monthly billing. I now believe that when the radio read meter project is completed, which should be in 2020, that we should instead transition directly to monthly billing. I had said during the budget process that if we went to bi-monthly billing, I thought we could do that with existing resources. I do think if we go to monthly billing, we probably will need some additional resources given the increase in workload that will go with going from quarterly billing to monthly billing. But I do believe that the benefit is worth the cost. So in summary, staff believes that transitioning to a 2-time per week irrigation schedule and transitioning to a monthly billing schedule could be implemented together and address not only average demand issues, but also peak demand issues. And I would add, if the board supports either or both of these, that certainly a public education initiative would accompany that. Obviously, the board does not take action at work sessions, and we're not asking for any decision today. But those are a couple of ideas that we've come up with that we think can help manage our demand, and would certainly be interested in any thoughts or feedback the board has. Before I conclude, I did also want to update you briefly on some of our water supply planning efforts. With regard to the joint permit application for the raw water intake at the Chickahominy River, the Corps of Engineers is still reviewing our application, and there's not really much new to report on that since the last time we updated the board. With regard to SWIFT, their pilot facility where they're injecting 1 million gallons a day began operation in May. So it's been in operation now for about 3 months. And we are continuing to monitor that and awaiting the results of that pilot project, which will hopefully, final results hopefully will be available in about a year or so. I have been in touch with Newport News to discuss possibly renegotiating the existing agreement that we have with them. I've written them a letter. I've had a couple of conversations with them since then, and I'm expecting a formal response from them in the near future. And then lastly, I would just say I've been in communication over the last couple of years with the owners of Cranston's Mill Pond, and they are continuing their process with DEQ to try to get a permit for that project. At this point, I'm still of the mindset that there's no reason to take any options off the table at this point. I do think before we would ask the board to make any decisions on a future water supply, and I would note that there aren't, a decision's not required necessarily anytime soon. We do still have 9 years left in our existing permit. The permit specifically this permit is specifically written to give us some time to make a decision, so we don't need to rush into anything. But I do think that the time has probably come, or is near at least, to update the water feasibility study that we conducted in 2015. At that time, SWIFT was not an option at all, and we now have, and I think soon we'll have even more additional information about some of the other options that would need to be further evaluated before we would ask the board to make any decisions on a future course. So that basically concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Let me ask the question, because that last thing you said there, when you talk about water options, you refer to SWIFT.
Mhm.
Explain to me how SWIFT provides water to us, other than,
Yes.
I mean, because it's put back into the aquifer.
Right.
Does it allow us to draw more out of the aquifer than our permit now allows? Or, I mean, how does that get us incrementally more water available?
Right. Of course, the idea behind SWIFT is that HRSD treats about 120 million gallons a day of wastewater, and the idea is that instead of discharging that into the waterways, it would be discharged into the aquifer instead. Because the aquifer is not recharging as fast as we're using the water from the aquifer, there is concern about the long-term sustainability of the aquifer. So the idea with SWIFT is that if this water can be injected into the aquifer, the hope is that it would allow users to then increase the amount of water that they can take out of the aquifer. But having said that, that has to be modeled, and that's part of what this pilot project is about, and it has to be modeled by DEQ. There are really two parts of SWIFT. I mean, one is can they get the chemistry right so that it's okay to inject it into the ground? But then it's a whole nother question about if you can withdraw it, because the water doesn't necessarily go equally all over. And it's not even, and Mr. Verdakis might be able to explain this better than me, but it's not even just about the amount of water. It has a lot to do with the water. More water being put in the aquifer can actually increase the pressure, which then makes it easier to withdraw. So the simple answer to your question is that the idea is that if SWIFT is successful, that it would allow, the hope is that it would allow users to withdraw more water. That is the hope. But it's not a given at this point. It would have to be modeled.
And I would like to let everybody know that I had a conversation with Doug recently about SWIFT, because this all occurred while I was not on the board. And I said, I have a basic, sort of a basic gut check on it. And that is that if it's good enough to put back in the aquifer, it should be good enough to put in the pipes. And his answer was that the people at HRSD say, yeah, it is good enough to be put into the pipes. It's good enough to drink. But apparently state law doesn't allow them to put them in the pipes, but it does allow them to put it back into the ground. So, I'd probably be a little more supportive of this project if I were really confident that our state government would actually let us recycle that, because apparently only a few states in the union do that right now.
Current state law, the term is called direct reuse, and current state law does prohibit direct reuse. There are a couple of states, I forget which ones, but there are a couple of states that do allow it, so it's an idea that's starting to gain some attention, but here in Virginia, it's not allowed. There are also some other places that are doing something similar to SWIFT. There are other places. It's not necessarily common, but SWIFT is not necessarily a new concept either. There are some other places where treated wastewater is injected back into the aquifer.
So, as I understand it, then the wastewater is treated to the point of being of drinkable quality,
Right.
but then it's put back into the aquifer. When we withdraw it, we put it through a final treatment.
That's correct. That's
Right.
correct. Yes,
Okay.
we would have to treat
So
it
it
again.
would be additionally treated
Right.
at that point
Right.
with all the other
Right.
water that's come through
Right.
naturally to
Right.
the process. And so the cost involved would be primarily in terms of the location of new water treatment facilities?
That's
That
correct.
are able to be more closely located to points of injection.
Right. That's
Okay.
correct.
And so that kind of cost is going to be borne regionally, right?
Well, the cost for the actual injection would be borne regionally because that would be an HRSD
Right.
cost. Now, if the James City Service Authority builds a treatment plant to withdraw that water and treat it and distribute it to its customers, that obviously would be borne by the JCSA. But the availability of the water in the aquifer, that would be part of SWIFT, and that would be funded regionally by the HRSD customer.
And so that would mean, would that mean we would need an additional facility beyond what we have at
Yes.
Five Forks?
Yes. Our capacity at Five Forks is 5 million gallons a day. So obviously that's not enough to meet our demand. So yes, we would have to construct another treatment plant.
So Doug, I remember reading or hearing at one point with SWIFT, once it's injected, it takes a long time for that to travel.
It does.
Could you explain how that works and timelines or sort of?
I believe, and Mr. Fregakis, tell me if I'm wrong, I believe it can take thousands of years. It's a very slow process.
Where it's injected,
Yes.
it stays right in there because there's nothing moving it.
Yeah.
Right.
So it just settles right in
But
that.
that's
core.
the natural recharge, right?
Right.
That's not what
Right.
we were talking about with
Right.
SWIFT.
No, with SWIFT, where
With
they
SWIFT.
injected it, basically
Yeah.
It
stays
takes a
within
long
that
time.
column.
Right.
It takes forever for it to ever go anywhere. You know, you think of it, and what I've read, correct me if I'm wrong, but once it's injected in that area, it doesn't travel like a stream or a river. It's kind of a locked holding area within the earth that water is just sitting there, nothing's moving it. So where they inject it, says it takes thousands of years to get it to spread out. To, you know, most time it's not going anywhere where it's at. And
Which brings up another question. When they're re-injecting this, what aquifer are they? Are they going
The potential.
the Potomac? So this should have no effect theoretically on the Chickahominy Piney Point, where a lot of people get their water out of that from individual wells.
Right.
Okay.
and then this is going to help with the land issue as far as shrinking,
Subsidence. And salt
and it's
water.
going to lift that and keep the salt water
Right.
out of it as well. So, you know, I know we've gotten a few comments on as far as the antibiotics and everything that's going around, and how do you treat that? Is it treated? Do you know if it's treated or not? But you know, I'd be of my pay grade as far as answering that question. But you know. And it's funny, we're having this discussion on water on the wettest week of the year. So everyone's like, well, everything's fine. You got plenty of water. I see it on the streets. But as I've always said since I've been on the board, I've always found it, you know, I love to see a beautiful yard. I love seeing nice plants and all that. I'm all for that. I'm not against water and that sort of thing. But the irrigation, you know, I'm thinking we're taking drinking water, which to me is gold, and putting it on grass. Doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I know when you get a lawn started, you have to, but after a while, Mother Nature takes it over. But you know, I'll see people watering when it's raining, and it's like, really? And I'm thinking, you know, okay, the earth was flooded at one time, might dry out the next time. You know, there could be an issue there. And I always worry about, you know, our water and what we're doing with our water. You know, and how we address, because I know if it hits me in the pocket, I'm gonna stop doing it or figure out another thing to do than to keep going down there. Some people it doesn't bother at all, but if I've got X amount of yard and I've got to water it to keep it to where it is, and it's costing me X amount, I'm gonna figure out maybe I don't need that amount of yard. Maybe I have a smaller area. You know, and not advocating it, you know, because a lot of people love their big yard. I think that's wonderful. No problem at all. But water is an issue. And this just addresses, because I'm in both systems. I'm in your system, and I'm also at home on a well, which is still your system in a roundabout way because you get pinged every time a well goes in. You know, that is calculated in it. Well, in my well system, I can water all I want. I can water till I dry the well out. On the other one, I can't, and I'm not advocating to do anything with the wells because I love my well. But you know that adds. People don't realize that. You know, you think of it as two different systems. Your system and my well at home, and they don't have any. But they do. We're all drawn from the same area, and you know people don't think about that and how it interacts and what it does, and I think that's something that. You know, we've got to look at and educate people, let them think about, hey, we're all in the same pond, you know, even though you're over here paying for it and I'm not because I've already put my well in. Yeah. But, you know, so those are, I'm glad to see some of the things. And I was always wondering what the draw was by water and how much water we were using to keep our landscaping up and that sort of thing. You know, we did a lot, and boards before me did a lot as far as toilets, sinks, faucets, how much you're using. If there's a drip, and Service Authority did a great job years ago going to the fairs and all that, and still doing, saying, this is the education you need. This will stop this. This will start, you can save. And, you know, I know one person that's in a tier 3. With his, and we talked about it, a tier 3, and it's a residential, and he doesn't have any irrigation. And he found out just through different things that he was doing how he could cut down on bath times and shower times, and cut down on appliances and all that. And he realized that, hey, this is what we need to work towards to cut that down. And y'all even came out and checked the meter to see if there was a leak, because it was like, there's no way. And but it's amazing, a drip or a toilet running or a long shower over a 3-month period. So I think if it's a month period, you know, because when I get my bill, that 3 months is already gone. So I can't adjust anything. I'm like, good gosh, are you kidding me? Let's do this. Let's figure it out. So we're figuring out now if I get it in a month, it's easier. I feel it's easier to pay, but it's also easy to see.
Right.
Next month, this thing better be down $50, $100, or whatever. We need y'all to figure out what's going on here, and this has got to come down. And so it gives me a chance to budget and do what I need to do as far as, you know, pulling that in. So.
I know all about water.
Yeah, you have a leak.
Which, as Mr. Powell pointed out, is not good for anybody, because not good for my bill and not good for the county to be losing water. So I just had a couple questions. One, you brought up looking at the water feasibility study, and you brought the time. We weren't really feeling a crunch for time, but how do we get all this in? And when do we, what kind of timeline are you looking at for looking at all these different options when you say 9 years? And 9 years seems like a long time, but it's really not.
Right.
And the SWIFT, I've gotten a lot of this. It seems the feedback seems to be picking up a little on that. I think people are really cautious of the unknown because they, you know, just not 100% sure what that's going to be like and look like, and there's concerns about that. And then I think I shared with you yesterday that I had been contacted by the Cranston Mill Pond people about going out there, and I know you and I, we'd all talked about that in the past as well. So what kind of timeline are you looking at for these different things?
So I don't necessarily have a date on the calendar that I can point at and say that's the date by which a decision has to be made.
Okay.
As I mentioned, our permit's good for another 9 years. What the permit says is that DEQ wants us to know what our alternative water source is at the end of the permit. It doesn't require us to actually have something online, but it does expect that we will have a decision. So in my mind, I certainly don't want to drag our feet, but I also think there's a danger in making a commitment too soon because of all these options that are, you know, up here. I really think we need to get more information about each one of them before an informed decision can be made. And we're doing that. I mean, we're well on our way to doing that. I think that we're probably, I talked about updating the water feasibility study. Yeah, I think we could probably start that process in a few months. But at the same time, I do want to caution against don't feel like we have to make a decision in the next few months or even in the next year or two. There is a huge difference in cost between our ability to continue to use groundwater is an incredibly low number compared to if we have to go build a water treatment plant and start that process. The cost difference is just too great to not make sure that we are do our due diligence and take great care in making this decision, because it's a huge financial decision, and the potential difference is in cost between the options or among the options is very significant.
So when Ms. Powell and I spoke today about some of this, would you confirm for me again, just to make sure I've had this straight? If we go ahead and start the study now, even though Francis Mill does not have their permit yet, and we don't know the final outcome of SWIFT, with this, the study can still happen. Is that correct? Including what they know about those issues at that point, and then can be updated as that furthers along?
I think that's accurate, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That way, at least we've got the ball rolling a little bit. Not that
Right.
we're going to be making a decision, just so that we have more information.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, a follow-up on one other question too. Are you going to send us the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
It was not.
Yes.
That'd be
Okay,
great.
great.
Yes.
Thank you. What type of pushback have you all done this before with irrigation, where you've pushed it back, and what kind of pushback do you expect to get from customers? And I also prefer the monthly billing, because I would have known that I had a $700 bill a lot
Exactly.
sooner than the last time.
Right.
But some people may not. I understand that. But so, what's your the combined experience tell you about how are people going to feel about this irrigation if we cut it back?
I personally don't have that background or experience. I would anticipate some. I don't know if I anticipate a huge amount of pushback. I think one of the things the consultant noted when he did this report was that he concluded that the vast majority of our customers who irrigate are, I think the term he used, were responsible irrigators. We do have a number of customers that irrigate quite extensively. It's a fairly small number, and so maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I do think there's starting to be some recognition that it's not an unlimited supply of water.
And then, how do you, frankly, are you going to go out in a JCSA car and check to make sure that it's not being? I mean, are you just going to go by their bill to make sure somebody's not? How are we going to know that people are truly doing what they're supposed to be doing and cutting back?
Right. Well,
Because I had to go yell at my husband one day because he was wrong. I'm like, this isn't our day.
That's what we rely on.
Yeah, well, exactly.
it would be more or less the same system that we have now. The difference is that, instead of every other day, Tuesday, if your house number ends in 0, 1, 2, or 3, Wednesday, 4, 5, 6.
Right, and
Thursday,
you're just going to
7,
hope people are going to. I mean, you're not.
We don't currently send people out
Police.
with the specific goal or specific task of looking to see that. But if we see it, if we happen to see it, or if we
You're
get
out.
complaints, we would simply enforce it the same way we enforce it now.
Okay.
And we do not have a lot of issues now.
Okay.
I think when they went to the odd even originally, I think it was a matter of education for most folks.
Yeah.
And it seems to be very well accepted by the community now. I can imagine if they understand the rationale behind it, going to twice a week versus 3 times a week, it's not a big deal to me because that's about what I do already anyway. I think one of the biggest driving factors for for me, that made me get rid of about half of my grass and put in just mulch and bushes, was trying to keep out of that third tier.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, I think that the monthly billing will be more helpful in managing that because, it was, and I guess now if we go to monthly billing, you have to adjust your figures for, as opposed to, now it's what, 15, 30,000 would have to be adjusted for a monthly
That's correct.
proration.
Yes.
Is there an additional administrative cost to going monthly or
It's an additional workload. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the work that's now done once a quarter would have to be done. You're tripling your workload.
Every 30 days.
But it's also additional postage, isn't it? Doug?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
Yes. So there is additional expense.
Right.
Keep in mind that we'll be saving time in terms of reading the meters. So when we are finished with that project, so there will
That's
be
right.
some savings there.
yes?
But as I said in the presentation, I do anticipate if we go to monthly billing, we will need some additional resources because it is an additional workload. But I do believe there's a
Bill will
benefit.
be by that point.
Now, will our bill or suggestion
lot.
set it up like Dominion Energy does now? I want to call them VEPCO, but Dominion Energy, and where you can see back 3 months ago
Yeah.
or last year.
Yeah.
Why is my water up from last year? Last year in the summertime, I was X amount of gallons down, triple that.
Yeah.
And kind of it might, a lot of people look at that and it'll jog their memory. Getting back to the question of Crance's Mill Pond, since I ride by it all the time. And does anybody remember when they built the dam? I thought it was, and I wasn't on the board then, but I thought it was connected to Colonial Heritage to use it as almost, I don't know if it's correct to say a BMP, but for water overage into that area. And I think there was something that there was some funding or something with, I don't know where it was, but to build that dam up. Because the owners, I don't think they probably had the funds, may have had the funds, I don't know. But to help with building that dam because there was, more rooftops and all that, more load on their
What
pond.
they told me when I was out there the other day was that when the dam blew out and they rebuilt it, they were actually had to build it about a foot lower than it was originally before the blowout. And the reason was because I guess the engineers, the Corps of Engineers or the EQ or somebody, it had been long enough that some of the areas that were underwater and now weren't were classified as wetlands and they wouldn't let them reflood it. So he says actually right now it's like it used to be at 9 feet and it's 8.1 now. So my understanding is it probably doesn't hold as much as it did before.
And it can't
And
probably increase.
not without going back to the engineers and getting a permit.
Yeah, well, we know how Ware Creek and all that went.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But we're getting more flooding on that road from that pond and closing it down more. And it's eventually, I look at that road all the time and look at what it's doing to the edge and everything else. Eventually, there's going to be an issue with that road. If you go in there right now and look at the color of the water that's going across there, and I've got some photos on my phone because I do them every time I go down there and go down there quite a bit, like I say. It's going down to Yarmouth, which is untouched, basically, pretty much. And it's brown. And I know water gets colored and all that. I've been in construction. It doesn't take but a drop of rain to color water. But, with the amount of flooding that we're getting, and growing up as a kid, we didn't get that much. It was a big event to make it do that. Now all of a sudden it's doing it more and more. It's very frequent. I'm calling Bill all the time. I need to close the road, And there's signs up on it today. I'm worried about the road and people go around it and go down there. And, I'm worried about the road and what's it going to do eventually to the road. Because after a while, that water goes, I bet it's 800, 900 foot of water across there when it's flooding, going all the way across that road. It's a good area of water that goes down through there. And I'm not saying it's anybody's fault or anything. I just, maybe when they made them bring it down, it caused a problem for all of us in the community. Not that it's the owners of the pond or the dam or the land or anything else. It may be because it was brought down 11 inches, and now all of a sudden it's causing us problems on our roadways, you know, down that way. And, you know, when school opens up and all that, you got to close it and go all the way around. And so it's something to think about. Is that I know one time it was way back, I believe when I was a kid, that they were gonna, you know, they even talked about moving the road down further and going across and flooding that whole area and creating a reservoir, but that never went anywhere. I don't know how that got out there or what went on with that, but you know, I know as hard as it is to get a reservoir and everything, and now it's limited space in there and it's flowing over quicker. So I'm worried about our road and an issue with our road as far as, you know, keeping the maintenance up on all that. We've got it on Jolly Pond. Got two little areas in my district that I'm concerned with the roads and people being able to get down through there. And I'm not putting fault on the dam or the construction of it or the pond or anything. It's just a collective of stuff that's now affecting our roadway.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. I had a couple of practical questions about this, and I think the monthly billing is a good idea. I'm a little worried about the complication of dividing the residences into three groups, just in terms of people remembered when they were supposed to do it. But does HRUPS have the ability to bill electronically?
You can get your bill electronically now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would obviously, if we wanted to encourage people to start doing that, cut down on the postage increases if we're going to monthly scheduling and again, some utilities do allow for a kind of smoothing of the costs. Is that something we want to do, or is it not? And I think customers appreciate the convenience and the predictability of knowing that, you know, well, if I pay the same amount every month,
Oh, yeah, like the
covered.
budget.
But their costs are going to go up in the summertime if they just pay based on usage of each month. So I guess that's one question I'd be interested in knowing how we would proceed on that. Are there any other opportunities to basically allow people to more or less opt out of the alternate day system? For instance, by just saying, you know, if you solely do drip irrigation, which I think is much more water efficient, right? Then you don't have to worry about which days you do it on. Again, it might be something to encourage people to use less water, and discourage them from using it on the lawns. Just keep it on the plants and the more expensive ornamentals and so forth. Don't know if that's anything worthwhile. You know, we have I think Ms. Larson is about to experience the biggest water conservation program, send her kids off to school.
Another part of Virginia's got to worry about.
We can't require that as a policy.
That will come from another office.
Those are some things that I think might be worth just keeping in mind as we go along. Yeah, I guess those are the real things I was thinking.
Okay, yeah, we can certainly look at that. I mean, the drip irrigation, I mean, really with drip irrigation, I don't know that we would even necessarily see that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah.
it's a way of really encouraging them to do something that's much less water intensive.
Right.
Is there, how would you go about educating HOAs with all of their, would you meet with them? Just saying. How do you go about educating groups like that? Because I'm thinking if you go to the HOAs, then maybe the HOAs can help spread the word as well to the community. But the HOA itself, you know, with irrigating all their open space and everything, what's the best way, do you think, with doing that?
I think if we I think if we were to proceed with any significant changes, we would need a comprehensive public education program. I think meetings with HOAs, social media, notices in the customers' bills. I think it would be a multifaceted approach, and we would probably employ all the different options that we have.
Okay. Thank you.
Along that line, if you were going to change, obviously, if we're going to change over to a monthly billing system, that can't be done until you get all the meters. So like, we're looking at a year or so for that.
The meter replacement project should be completed in 2020. So
2020.
we're probably looking at roughly 2 years.
Okay, roughly 2 years. So that's one issue we could deal with. It. If you were going to do the odd even change to instead of 2 day, two groups, 3 groups to try to bring down that peak demand. Well, when would you try to implement that? With next year's season?
I think at the earliest.
Okay.
I think if the board wanted to proceed in that direction, I think we could do it next year. If you wanted to wait another year, I think we can afford to do that.
Okay.
We're not at a critical point where it's got to be done now. So I would say next irrigation season at the earliest, but certainly we another year would be fine as well.
Right. And did your consultant give you any indication as to what the effect they thought? In other words, what effect do they think will come about from these changes? In other words, they recommended 2 changes. If we made these 2 changes, how much conservation do they anticipate it might generate, and how would it move that figure on when out? From what 22 or 24 or whatever.
They did not quantify in terms of gallons, and we didn't ask them to.
Okay.
We asked them really to evaluate in terms of lost revenue. And they did estimate. They estimated going to twice a week irrigation schedule. They estimated that would reduce our revenue 5 to 10%.
And that's something you don't want to move on any faster than next year?
No.
Okay.
I mean, we're getting close to the end of irrigation
Okay.
season this year.
Right.
I think next year is the absolute earliest. And again,
we must be near the end. My lawn's dead.
right.
I had one other question, and it went back to the Newport News, because next year, 2019, is the year we have to make a decision on that
Yes.
second part of the purchase agreement.
Yes.
Do you feel that we will probably have some substantive discussions with them and maybe some other alternatives prior to having to make a decision on that?
I do.
Okay.
I'm optimistic about that.
Okay.
Yes, I think that we will have some additional information in which you can base a decision. I would add, and I think emphasize, the existing Newport News agreement for an additional $25 million adjusted for inflation, which is now about $33 million, and plus infrastructure improvements that would be made. We're really talking about a $50 million investment to be able to keep the 4 million gallons a day as opposed to the 2 million gallons a day. And that agreement obviously was negotiated before we knew our groundwater withdrawal permit was going to be reduced. The existing Newport News agreement doesn't even replace the water that's being cut in our groundwater withdrawal permit. So to go forward with the Newport News agreement as it's currently written, we would be looking for another source of water before the ink was dry on that agreement. The approach that we're trying to take is a longer term solution, and use the money that would go towards that and use it towards a longer term solution.
Okay.
Now, if Newport News, if we can negotiate something with them that is more of a long term solution for us, then I think that's something that should be evaluated.
Okay.
But I have reservations about the Newport News agreement as it's currently constructed.
Sure.
Right. It was conditioned on the idea that we're contributing to the cost of building the King William Reservoir,
Right.
which is non-existent.
Never went anywhere. And I believe their funds go into their general account, not into the service authority
Some of their funds do, yes.
for the water.
Yes.
Right.
So
There's a payment that the Waterworks makes to the city on an annual basis, yes.
And that could be adjusted.
And some of our residents pay that.
Yes.
there any further questions?
There was one, I have one, real quick. Busch Gardens does a great job as far as pulling in any water they have in their air conditioning units and that sort of thing to put in their carts to go around and hand water and that sort of thing. I was wondering if we could reach out to Busch Gardens, you probably already have, reach out to Busch Gardens and see what they're doing to conserve water. They've really worked hard to try to conserve that water. They put big containers out so it drips into those, and then they go in the mornings and pump it out of those to fill up their trucks and the water, and that's why. And it may be something that some other companies in our area that don't know about it may go, I didn't even think about collecting it that way. Okay, we could do this or do that. And it may be something that can be shared through the commercial people and see if there's something that they could put into their companies for our bigger plants and that sort of thing. They could tailor, maybe Walmart or some of the others, they could tailor what Busch Gardens is doing and leading and conserving water.
And I just was going to follow up just that HRSD and HRUBS, you can sign up for paperless with them, so to start that process.
So I guess just before you adjourn, the issue of the irrigation schedule, that is established in the regulations. So it requires action on your part if you want to change it. So again, we're not asking for decisions or action today, but at some point I will come back to you and say, do you want me to bring something forward to you at a regular BOD meeting that you can take action on?
Anybody else? No, good.
All right.
Do we
Thank
have-
you very much.
Sure, thank you very much for being here.
Thank all of you.
Appreciate you. Do we have a motion to adjourn until 5 p.m. on August 14, 2018 for the regular meeting?
Motion?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. With that, I do need a motion to go into closed session for the discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia, and for consideration of a personnel matter, the appointment of individuals to county boards and commissions pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia and pertaining to the Economic Development Authority.
So moved.
Mr. Porter?
I was supposed to give it out.
Oh, it's a,
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
aye.
Larson.
Aye. With that, we'll go into closed session. Bring us back into open session. If I could have a certification of the,
I move to certify that we
Closed
only
session.
spoke about those items we indicated we would speak about.
thank you, Mr. Porter.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Hippel.
Aye.
Turner and Mr. Carlton Stockton to fill the vacant terms expiring in June of 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Porter.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay. With that, I'll ask for a motion for adjournment to recess. Well, no, excuse me.
Recess.
We're going to recess until 11 a.m. on July 31st, 2018 at the Law Enforcement Center, 4600 Opportunity Way, Williamsburg.
Motion?
Mr. Porter?
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, with that, we're in recess.